Good afternoon. This is a friendly crowd. Good afternoon, everybody. I like this attitude. It's a friendly crowd we have here today. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Council Member Smoot Carl Mitchell. Smoot is truly a great environmentalist at the local level. He led the charge for neighborhood organizations in working for policies in Austin that are more humane to neighborhoods, to people, and to the environment. I give you Council Member Smoot Carl Mitchell.
It's great. The introducer gets introduced around here. I'll be very brief. The program this afternoon will be a presentation by Agriculture Commissioner Jim Hightower, and he, of course, is head of the Texas Department of Agriculture and has introduced some very progressive policies, environmentally sensitive policies into the agricultural community in the state of Texas. And since he's a lot better speaker than I am, I will let him get on with the program. Jim, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. 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 All right. Well, I think I'll just head on back to the office then. Not going to get any better than that. I appreciate very much Annette Lavoie and Smoot Carl Mitchell and all of you for this warm welcome, and thank Gary Keith and the whole Earth Day program here in Austin and around the state of Texas for putting on this forum, because this is exactly what we've got to get back to, this kind of talking to each other and doing a little bit of strategizing with each other and getting down to work. Earth Day 1990, in my view, in the last week or so, is getting a little bit glitzy. We're not quite as crass, I guess, as the centennial of the Statue of Liberty celebration was last year, when we had 200 Elvis Presley imitators out there. But it's got to be more than just little plastic globes as keychain holders, and we need to remember that this is not merely a day of celebration, but really a day of rededication, a day of rededication to dealing with the very real problems that we've got on this globe. This morning in the Electric American Statesman, I know you read, U.S. factories release 4.6 billion pounds of toxic pollutants, 1/4 of which are here in the state of Texas and our good neighbor to the east in Louisiana. Global warming, greenhouse effect, pesticide contamination, ocean dumping, soil erosion. We here in this state do something like more than 1 billion pounds of soil erosion every year. That's enough soil to cover Dallas 3.5 feet deep. Now, I know there are those of you who think we should cover Dallas 3.5 feet deep, but not with a good Texas topsoil, however. And the issue that I'm supposed to spend at least half a second on today, which is the matter of water, which in this state is a mighty precious commodity indeed. The issue of whether we're going to have access by all people to clean, abundant, and affordable water. That's by no means a given. Since the population growth, the impact of global warming, the problem of wasting of water, the pollution of water, and the very affordability of water. Some people in this state still, particularly down in the Coloniases in West Texas and in El Paso, and then down in the Rio Grande Valley, literally without water that will flow along by their house but cannot come into their homes. Water is the most precious natural commodity that we have, short of air, and without which we cannot do. It is of greater value, of greater economic value, for example, even than electricity. yet is succumbing to the population growth pressures. For example, the Ogallala Aquifer, the largest freshwater aquifer in the United States, it is being depleted at about 15 to 20 times the rate of its recharge. Down in Houston, they're in a constant battle down there with subsidence because we're mining water out of that region of our state. The phenomena of San Antonio having to suck water up out of the Edwards Aquifer and then flushing it so that Corpus Christi can get water downstream. Literally a fact. We're all related to these aquifers and to these and to the scarce water flow that we have in our society. In agriculture, we're consuming 70 to 75% of all the water that is consumed. Yet if global warming trends continue at the same time that population growth continues, it's going to get, that demand for water is going to get worse. Some 25% increase in demand for irrigation water, for example, and that doesn't count unless it gets hotter, unless we get global warming, and then it's going to be great because hot plants get thirstier, as you have learned by the, or if you have not learned, you will by August of this year, when the shrub you're just putting in this month will be dead in your yard. If rainfall decreases, as is likely over most of our state, or even more dramatic changes take place, it's going to be a worse problem even than that. After all, only about 10 to 15% of the water that falls as rain actually is recovered in an aquifer, recovered in a river, recovered in a lake somewhere. The rest of it evaporates. So if we get less rain, we're going to get less water and retain water. And if the temperature rises, then we're going to increase that evaporation. There's an estimate that a 4% temperature rise and a 10% decrease in rainfall would cut stream flow in this state as much as 50% and dramatically reduce the groundwater recharge throughout our state. And that is not an impossible proposition, since the current models of greenhouse effect and global warming in this state seem to agree that it is going to create a climate that is hotter and that is drier in all but the coastal areas of southeastern portion of our state, where it is likely that monsoons will develop. That's the good news. Wasting water, however, is our number one environmental water crime right now, because we're wasting it rather dramatically. As I say, in agriculture, we're using about 75% of the water that is consumed in the state of Texas. Most of the irrigation systems in the state of Texas, particularly the center pivot spray systems that you see as you fly the airplanes out across the western portion, south coastal areas of our state, about 40% of that water evaporates into the air, never getting to the plant at all. So conservation becomes really our greatest need. The second greatest problem, in addition to the wasting of water, is wasting it through the pollution that we're doing in the state of Texas, especially from pesticides and fertilizer applications, as a major problem for the groundwater. And while Texas aquifers are not exactly just under widespread contamination yet, nonetheless, there is evidence of localized contamination problems because of pesticide and intensive nitrate use from fertilizer applications out there. We've got to get involved in this kind of a fight, not because of an Earth Day concept, a celebration sort of thing, a momentary surge of activity, but we've got to get involved because it literally is our future. And that involvement really comes down to citizen participation, by which I mean politics, not electoral politics necessarily, but taking an interest and taking a very active role, as so many of you in this room have been doing, to dealing with this waste of water and this pollution of water. And that means that we've got to surround the institutions of our own government at the federal level, but closer to home, with the Railroad Commission, the Water Commission, the Health Commission, the Department of Agriculture, and other agencies that have responsibility for water conservation, water protection in our society. Quite candidly, just among us chickens, we ain't doing that good a job on water in the state of Texas. We are allowing much greater contamination of our water supplies than we should be. We have too many special interests that are tied into some of these agencies that are running things, rather than the long-term interests, not of our generation, but of future generations of Texans. We have got to become active in that process. The Environmental Protection Agency is requiring every state to adopt a water conservation plan. That was, EPA designated the Department of Agriculture to do that, but the only governor that Texas has at the moment decided that that would be a better place in the safer harbors of the Water Commission, so now they have that authority moved over there. The good news is that they will now be undergoing a process of developing a statewide conservation plan. You need to be involved in that process. That is a public process. It is open to every citizen in this state, and we need to organize, beginning right here with an Earth Day Forum and reaching out across the state to see that we deal with conservation, because the cheapest drop of water that we're going to get is the water that is already there. Let's conserve what we have. Through conservation, we have much less need to be building dams, much less need to be building concrete structures across our land. There is much to be done in conservation, and it needs to become a principle of water regulation in our state. Before any dam is built or any other structure to impound water is built, a conservation plan ought to, one, have to be put in place, but two, all conservation alternatives should have to be exhausted first. That's the kind of battles that we've got to make. I think the people of Texas, as I think around the country, are very well aware of this, because the people, in my view, have moved way out ahead of us good-looking politicians and the lobbyists and the corporate lawyers and even environmental organization leaders, way out ahead of the institutional framework of the environmental movement. In fact, I believe that the greatest difference between Earth Day 1990 and Earth Day 1970 is not that we're a much better dressed crowd today, but instead is in the dynamic between environmental leaders and the general public. 20 years ago, environmental leadership was trying to push the general public to get more active in environmental issues. Today, the general public is pushing us to get more aggressive in our protection efforts. And by the general public, I'm not talking about ex-hippies like Smoot Carl over here, or upscale activists or Presbyterian conservationists. Rather, I'm talking about the people who take their kids down here to the Gulf Coast or to the Jersey Shore, but cannot let their kids go in the water because of its contamination. I'm talking about the lower middle income families in our state, and including in this city, who got maybe a $60,000 mortgage in a suburban home and on the far outreaches of the city, up against a cotton field, noticing that her roses died after the third spraying this year, and remembering back at this time last year, the neighbor's cat was found dead under the porch, and beginning to think that maybe there's a connection between all this and the rashes that the kids are beginning to develop. I'm talking about the working stiff down at Port Arthur and down at Deer Park in plastics plants, who learn that they're going to die 10 years younger than they otherwise would because of where they work, at the same time that their corporate ownership is trying to bust their union, lower their wages, and cut their health plans. I'm talking about some mighty agitated regular Americans who are out there in the countryside, most of whom do not even belong to an environmental organization, but 84% of whom, according to a New York Times poll reported on Tuesday of this week, believe that pollution is a serious national problem that is getting worse despite 20 years of Earth Day progress made by the environmental movement. 71% of those people say that we must protect the environment even if it means increased government spending and higher taxes on themselves. 74% believe that protecting the environment is so important that requirements and standards cannot be too high, and that environmental improvements must be made regardless of the cost of those improvements. Now, those are remarkable figures. I'm an elected official. I know something about percentages and polls. 55% in an election is considered a landslide. But 71%, 74%, 84% of the people on these environmental issues, that's not a landslide. That's not even a mandate. That's a burning bush. It is a clear sign to us all that we need to do something. Yet we hear from the White House this very week that we must go slow on global warming. We hear from a Democratic-controlled Congress that we must seek a middle ground on clean air legislation. The public is not fooled by these kinds of waffles and dodges. I mean, you don't need Carl Malden's nose to sniff out the reality that when they say go slow and seek a middle ground, they are talking about protecting the status quo, protecting the special interests. And as a rancher out in West Texas told me, status quo is Latin for the mess we're in. We've had too much of the status quo. It's time for some changes in our society. And I suggest to you that we don't even have to worry that much about the public swallowing any of this billion-dollar television blitz that we have going on by the major corporations, showing corporate America hugging Bambi out there. We even had in our local newspaper a op-ed piece the other day by our friends, there it is, at the Texas Chemical Council, pledging down here at the bottom to continue our commitment to the environment 365 days a year. Now that's scary, isn't it? Do us no favor. All the ads, all the op-ed pieces, all the PR that they can do doesn't matter. It's kind of like putting earrings on a hog. It just doesn't hide the ugliness that's down under there. We know what those companies are up to. There are some sincere companies that have made changes, and we must embrace those changes and applaud them. But we must not be taken in by any hype. We've got to do what's got to be done, and it's not going to be done on Sunday of this week. It's what's going to be done on Monday and all the subsequent days down the road that really counts. That's the battle that you and I are in. The people themselves are the ones who are making those changes. Really, the most ordinary people are making the most extraordinary changes. We've been pleased in the Texas Department of Agriculture to be working with a lot of those people. We, for example, proposed about a year and a half ago an organic certification program for food in this state, a program by which we literally go out on the farm and inspect to make sure that the production standards that we have established are being met by the farm and therefore deserving of the Texas Department of Agriculture's organic certification label that can then be used on that product down at the marketplace for you to go in and pick up that organic production, have some confidence that it is what it says that it is. We thought that maybe we'd get 20, 30 farmers signed up the first year. We had more than 100 farmers sign up the first year. We expect 250 to be signed up by the end of this crop year here in the state of Texas. And again, I'm not talking about some balloon flying hippie who's going out there on a quarter acre and saying, hey, let's grow some sprouts here, though there's some of that going on, and I don't knock that. I'm talking about the mainline farmers who are making the switch to organic, and not all of them, but because they've had some sort of ethereal personal experience that led them to that conclusion. Rather, the experience that they have had is that farming in the traditional method is costing them their income and increasingly costing them their farms. We've had 50,000 farmers go out of business during the wretched decade of the 1980s in this state. Good farmers, productive farmers, not getting a fair price on their commodity at the same time that the cost of producing that commodity has gone up rather dramatically. I can take you out to Muleshoe, Texas, if you want to go with me, to a man named Jim Crawford. Got a BS in animal science out at Texas Tech University. Been farming at Muleshoe since 1972. Pretty substantial farmer, 900 acres, raising food corn, wheat for grazing the livestock on, and raising cotton out there. Farming traditionally, anhydrous ammonia, superphosphate fertilizer, atrazine, treflan. These are the kind of chemicals and fertilizers that he's were using. But by 1982, a decade later, his farm was losing so much money that he was about to go down. And he realized he had to look for other ways if it was going to be profitable. He took a hard look at his entire operation. And he saw those input costs, the cost of that fertilizer, the cost of the fuel, the cost of the machinery itself, going up dramatically. At the same time, the price for his corn and his cotton was going down just as dramatically. That was a burning bush experience for him. And he began to realize that organic production, which is what his old mom and daddy used to do about 200 miles to the east of him, could bring premium prices and higher yields, and it could lower his costs. So he began to search around, and he started with a market. He went to the tortilla manufacturers. He went out to Arrowhead Mills in Hereford. He went to other food corn users and asked if they'd be interested in buying organic production, and they said yes, that they would do so. So then he began to convert his operation. That's a slow and it's a risky business, but it turned out to be worth it for him. He began to feed the soil, the goal being to keep it mellow, keep it balanced, keep it fertile. Don't cause harm to the microorganisms that are within it, the earthworms and the other soil life that retains the moisture and that produces the nutrients that will create healthier plants, more productive plants. He went to crop rotation, winter crop, summer crop, and then a fallow crop. He doesn't burn the crop residue anymore. Every 2 years he adds 10 to 15 tons of composted manure, an abundance of which is available out there from the feedlots, and plows that under. The result of all of that is that in the first year of making the switch to organic production, he only got about 60% of the normal yield on his corn. The second year, he got about 70% of normal yield. The third year, he had normal to better yield, and today, in his fourth year, he's expecting about 150% increase in the yield over what he used to get in the traditional farming method. And he can produce that corn using 25% less water than he was doing in the old ways, and the price that he's receiving for the organic corn is 1.5 times better than what the non-organic corn was. The point being, it works. It just makes common sense. This guy is not in it for a hobby. This guy is in it, as he says, to feed his family. And he can feed his family better doing it this way than the other way. And this is one example out of dozens and even getting to be hundreds of examples in the state of Texas of people who are making the system work going on all across the state. We need to tap into these people because they have the genius. And the role of government, the Department of Agriculture, the Water Commission, the agricultural educational institutions of our state, our role is to work with these enterprising people, to listen to them and to do what it is that they need to be done, because through their enterprise, their gumption, their genius, they are going to generate a new sustainable agriculture in this country that is both ecologically and economically viable for the people of our state. So we've got to get involved with those folks, and all of us have got to get involved in supporting these kinds of people and programs that make sense for our grassroots economy, programs that make sense for our ecology as well. That requires everybody to be active, and I'm just delighted to see the new activism on the campuses in this city and all across this country that's really coming alive. And I know there's some criticism by some of the administrators saying, well, that, there's just a bunch of agitators coming in, but the agitator's the center post in the washing machine that gets the dirt out. Don't ever forget that. So don't be afraid to go out there and talk about what you believe in. And in that agitation, we've got to reach out, and that's what my message has tried to be to you here today. It's not just a matter of a few people who are going to come to a forum like this who care about the environment. Regular working class folks do. The farmers out there do. There's a poll in Iowa just a couple of weeks ago that showed that 87% of corn and soybean farmers in Iowa believe that they're using too many chemicals. Farmers know that. They live on the land. It's their soil, it's their families that are exposed, it's their water that is exposed. It makes sense. So let's not make false assumptions about ourselves and put up any false barriers. We must reach out into a coalition. It's not enough to have the bean sprout eaters. You got to have those snuff dippers out there on your side too. Team together into a coalition and then put forward a program that makes sense and then get involved. Take that program directly in to the Water Commission as they try to forge that policy that's required by the Environmental Protection Agency. We ought to have the best water conservation program of any state in the union because we're one of the most vulnerable states on water. But we're not going to have that if we let those commissioners hide up in that building over there at the Stephen F. Austin building. You've got to get inside that building yourself. And then you've got to be outside the building, organizing people, organizing those farmers, organizing the workers in those plastic plants, organizing the people in the suburbs as well as on the campuses, and have a public policy instead of a special interest policy. We have the wherewithal to make all of this happen. It is really up to the political will. I'll leave you with something that William Jennings Bryan said almost exactly 100 years ago. He said that our destiny is not a matter of chance, it is a matter of choice. It is not something to be awaited, it is something to be achieved. Let's achieve a sound environmental future for our people. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I understand we'll have a little bit of time for question and answers. Cesar Chavez is on next, and I don't want to take even a single second of his time, but how much time do we have? 5 minutes? 10 minutes? 5 or 10. Anybody has a question? There's a question right there.
Mr. Hightower, are you familiar with the environmental case to be made for growing hemp in Texas? Are there any prospects of this? Would you consider advocating it?
I don't even remember the 60s, man, so don't try to press me on that. No, I'm not, but we will consider any crop diversification that makes ecological sense for Texas.
Commissioner Hightower.
Am I to understand we have to go to microphones to ask questions?
Yes.
There's some people raising their hands. I think you have to go to microphones.
Based on all the changes that are going on in the world, I think a lot of people are saying we can change the way we spend our federal budget dollar from so much on defense to other needs such as water and education, healthcare, and that kind of thing. Would you share, and there's some hard choices to be made. Here in Austin locally, we have a choice of building an airport on farmland or taking a facility that is a federal facility that we could use for an airport. They're real hard choices for local communities. Do you have any comments about economic conversion and the potential that lies there?
Well, yes. I don't want to put Smoot Carl Mitchell in a bad position here, but I'll say two things. One that'll make him happy, and one that might not. I believe that the peace dividend should be brought home, and literally home. They're talking about $150 billion a year ultimately being available if you're accepting the New York Times figure. And we might want to retain some of that at a federal level for certain national programs that have to be done. But I believe that we should redistribute that money back to the people through local governments. Those programs have been shoved by the Reagan administration and now by our governor down onto local governments. The responsibility for dealing with an infrastructure that is not merely crumbling but collapsing all around us, of dealing with the educational and health needs of children in our society, of dealing with the environmental problems that we have. That money could be distributed, and I think if I have got it right, that would result, the Austin share of that would be something more than $400 million a year would be put in here, so that we could then have money to talk about doing some of the things that need to be done here. To me, that is by decentralizing really a populist approach to redistributing the peace dividend, it puts that money back in the hands of the people for us to decide what we want the priorities to be put on. With that said, I favor the use of the Bergstrom Air Base as our airport. I'm also completely ignorant about whether it makes any sense or not. Yes, sir.
I'm concerned with the groundwater legislations. My feeling is that water is a commodity and therefore owned by everybody, and that we shouldn't have private water. But I'm concerned that groundwater legislations as they are need to be changed before we can get even close to what I believe. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think that's true. The groundwater legislation has got to be changed, and that is exactly the process that I'm talking about, that the Water Commission is about to go through some of that. And we need to be very active in that process, and we need to be having some meetings to put forward a program that folks like you want to support, and then developing a strategy to build the grassroots political support for that, and forcing the Water Commission to accept a groundwater program, a pesticide runoff program, a conservation program, et cetera, that meets the needs of the broad public and not the needs of a special handful of people.
I understand that surface water and groundwater legislations are different. Therefore, I'm curious, who owns the rainwater?
Well, we don't own any water.
That's my point. That's just what I wanted to break an observation. Thank you.
I've heard some things recently about faucet aerators, and I was wondering if you knew exactly how much water they save per year, or on the average.
How much water what saves?
Faucet aerators.
Anybody know? I don't know.
You don't know?
Does anybody know? Okay. You have tapped a major source of ignorance. How many? 15? 40 to 50%. Gentleman down here. I recognize authority on it.
I'm James L. Brown, interested in responsible citizen. This has been a great day, Commissioner. As I indicated to you a while ago, I wish you could have been here all day.
Me too.
I enjoyed very much your story about, I think it was Crawford, who increased his production by not using chemicals. Can we focus a moment on the great blacklands of Texas, up Dallas and east, and the beautiful cotton country especially? It's my understanding that the cotton farmers, not a food crop, admittedly, use tremendous chemicals. I hope you'll tell that story, and can you relate it to growing cotton in that part of the country where so many chemicals are put on, not only in fertilizer, but defoliants and everything else, that we can do something about that?
Indeed, it is a problem, though. In that part of the country, the blackland country you're talking about, there's very little cotton raised there anymore. That has gone west. It is nearly all out in the Lubbock South Plains area of our state, and it has gone south into the valley and up around Corpus Christi. There's cotton. There's a little bit of cotton here and there, but the major cotton growing area of the state now is out in the Lubbock area. It has been a major absorber of chemicals. However, through the integrated pest management program that has been run for now probably 20 years, I guess, maybe more than that even, in the state of Texas, the chemical use on cotton has been cut statewide by something toward 40%, between a third and 40%. However, this gentleman I was just talking about, Jim Crawford, out in Muleshoe, Texas, he raises cotton too, and he raises it without chemicals. It is possible to do so. And he had a yield cut there, but that is now coming back up as well. Another interesting thing about cotton, just to take a quick second, is that most of our cotton produced out in West Texas, it is a short staple, weak fiber cotton, not a premium quality spinning cotton. Most of it is exported, but we have another economic development project out there in the town of Post, where a gentleman by the name of Joe Pate has developed a process to use cotton batting, using that South Plains cotton, as an insulation material for buildings, to replace asbestos and fiberglass and et cetera. A natural product. He's got a process that makes it fire retardant to prevent it from packing down. Looks to be a tremendous enterprise. We're talking about probably 160 jobs being established for this in the town of Post. That doesn't solve the unemployment problems of Texas, but it does in Post, and that's that's the other kind of innovation we've got to get to. Then we must look at ways, if you're going to raise cotton in that part of the world, we've got to look at ways, as Texas Tech is doing at its Cotton Research Center out there, to use much less water in cotton production, or to use also to be able to use salt water in cotton production, and possibly slurry water out of the cities.
I want to ask you something about a very touchy subject for Texas, being as this is the home of barbecue. Livestock production is documented to be one of the largest consumptions of water and other resources and contributors to pesticides and chemicals. and so on. And in Texas, I'm sure this is also the case, although we do more grazing than factory-style farming. And this leads, livestock production is leading to deforestation in not only rainforests, but also in America. I was wondering when and if it's ever going to be appropriate for people to possibly address the role of meat in their diets and its effect on the environment, and if Texas might be prepared to start thinking about that.
Well, I think there are Texans who are thinking about that, and Texans who are doing things about it. I mean, we're following the national patterns pretty precisely in terms of less beef consumption, replacing that with poultry and fish and even just vegetarian diets. So so there is a clear move in that direction. As far as rainforest problems, I think that is a responsibility of the United States and the importing nations of that product. I believe we ought to have country of origin labeling, that you ought not to be able to go down there taking federal money, which is available, to go deal with rainforests in Brazil or to go to Guatemala or Honduras or any of those nations down there, raise cattle, and then ship those back in here and dump that meat on our market. We are strong supporters of the, this is a little, getting a little far from your original question, but there's a proposal in the United States Congress by Senator Patrick Leahy in the Farm Bill that's being considered, called the Circle of Poisons provision, that would prohibit chemical manufacturers in this country from sending to third world countries chemicals that cannot be used here. And it would prohibit food being imported from those countries if they use chemicals from any other part of the world. That is. I'm told we must go. We'll take one more question.
What are your feelings on using gray water from bathtubs and showers to water your yards?
For yards and things, it makes all kinds of sense. And don't we have some projects, I think, out of the city that encourage that? I mean, it's
I thought
it's the law. There you go. Okay, makes all kinds of sense. I'm told by Smoot Carl, who should be addressing this rather than me, that there are some state health code provisions that need to be changed to allow that, and that's often the problem. Some of the things that make sense and that need to be done, our own government is in the way, and sometimes that's at a state level. Now, the good news is it's quite possible to change those rules and regulations. We've been able to do that in the past. So again, that should be a part of that program that I'm talking about, that environmentalists with farmers, with working people should forge, so that we go to these appropriate agencies, we go to the legislature, we go to the Congress with a program that makes sense for all the people. Thank you very much.
We're very grateful to Commissioner Hightower and Councilmember Smoot Carl Mitchell. Cesar Chavez will join us at 3:30. We'll begin with his film, The Grapes of Wrath.